Good evening and welcome, and thank you for coming here tonight. This event will be in two parts. The first part will be a concert, the first rendition of that concert of 1948 that is illustrated in your programs, and the second part will be a description of the context by Raffaele Bedarida, who is a scholar who has kind of rediscovered Cagli's work. And now a few words of introduction. I'm Natalia Indrimi, director of Centro Primo Levi. In the past weeks, I've received hundreds of emails and letters asking to fight Holocaust distortion because never again is now. It sounds good, but I find these kind of statements frightening. These slogans, empty of meaning, the work on history to which so many people and so many of us dedicate their life. It should be obvious that oppression and murder should never happen again, anywhere. But an intimation that made sense in the year following the immense destruction of the Second World War, today, after 80 years filled with senseless horror, sound more like a piece of advertising than an ethical stance. We know that oppression and murder happen everywhere as we speak. And so we need to ask ourselves, never again what, for whom, and what distortion. Knowledge is not only about what we know, but is most importantly about how we know. Knowledge implies different views, interpretative labor, trial and error, changing perspectives, the emergence of evidence that resist explanation. Critical work must unsettle us at every step. It is not a safe place because it is a space where intelligence is at work. We know that there is a truth, but no one can pin it down, let alone own it. Truth is there for us to know that we exist in relation to others and in a world that is much larger than our own. It is there at the end of a journey in which we labor together and we understand that we can agree and disagree. We know that, to the same token, our memory is never one and never static. It is constructed by what our minds captured as much as by what our mind left behind. This ongoing laboring on change is essential to building knowledge, and with knowledge, human relations. It lays the space in which we construct humanity, one that sages, philosophers, and rabbis have called love, where no things and no person are ever identical to themselves. When we fight over distortion and identity, we're simply fighting against ourselves, against our intelligence, and against the only tool we have to trick the limits of the human mind. When we're inside those limits, we feel the comfort of certainty. We feel the comfort of being on the right side, of being the good ones. And that's when we become most vulnerable. That's when we become, in the words of the great historian Joseph Yerushalmi, an abbreviated humanity. And so we come to tonight's presentation, the outcome of many years of work. First and foremost, Raffaele Bedarida's rediscovery of Corrado Cagli. Alessandro Cassin with Mark Shapiro and Cantori in New York brought back to the stage music that was presented only once in 1948, and not far from this building. The piece's refrain is Del domani non v'è certezza, of tomorrow there is no certainty. Cagli and his work were largely forgotten. I venture to say that one of the reasons for his oblivion lies in his being quintessentially anti-identitarian. Cagli could never be labeled a fascist, an anti-fascist, a soldier, a pacifist, a Jew, an Italian, an American, a communist, a capitalist, one who loved men and loved women, and his artistic styles were ever-changing. By today's standards, he could not be abbreviated and reduced to a slogan. Tonight we wish to reflect together on the transformability of human nature, the challenges of interpreting the past and the way in which this affects our understanding of truth, not as a trivial object that can be distorted or denied, but as the essence of the respect that each human being owes to another. No matter how much we fret about the past, and we struggle to brand and be branded, even if we cling with all our might to the small, comfortable space of our limits and the righteousness of our judgment, events will always find us unprepared. Of tomorrow, there is no certainty. And now, let me introduce the two main organizers of this evening, Nicola Lucchi, director of the Center for Italian Modern Art, and Stefano Albertini, director of Casa Italiana zerilli-marimò. And thank you again for being here tonight.
Thank you, Natalia, and good evening, everyone. My name is Nicola Lucchi. I am the director of the Center for Italian Modern Art, and on behalf of our president, Laura Mattioli, and everyone at CIMA, I am delighted to welcome you to tonight's musical performance. And I especially thank Consul Alessandra Oliva for being with us tonight. The Center for Italian Modern Art is a nonprofit research and exhibition institution whose mission is to promote the study and appreciation of under-recognized modern and contemporary Italian artists and their contributions to a global artistic discourse. We accomplish this mission through exhibitions hosted in our headquarters on Broome Street in Soho, through a fellowship program for doctoral and postdoctoral scholars, through our publications and public events. I am especially grateful to Casa Italiana zerilli-marimò of New York University and to the Centro Primo Levi of New York for the financial and logistical support that they contributed to this project, which was developed in connection with our exhibition, Transatlantic Bridges, Corrado Cagli, 1938-1948, curated by Raffaele Bedarida, an exhibition which shed light on Cagli's human and intellectual journey during his transformative years in the United States from 1939 to 1948. Public programs for this exhibition, including this one, were supported by a donation from the Tiro Segno Foundation. As a Jewish and openly gay artist, Cagli became the target of virulent attacks, especially after Italy promulgated its racial laws in 1938. In response to these hostile conditions, Cagli left his homeland and sought refuge in the United States, where he became an influential figure within the New York émigré artistic scene. As World War II raged on, Cagli joined the US Army, receiving training on the West Coast before returning to Europe to participate in historical events such as D-Day and the liberation of the Buchenwald concentration camp. After the war, Cagli resumed his artistic activities in New York, including a collaboration with George Balanchine's Ballet Society. The triumph of Bacchus and Ariadne, which premiered 76 years ago on February 9, 1948, is therefore a ballet that Cagli conceived in times of both euphoria and preoccupation, of healing and trauma. The Renaissance costumes, architectures, and literary sources at the core of the performance provide a stark contrast from the drawings documenting the Holocaust that Cagli witnessed in 1945, and are a testament to the resilience of humanistic culture in the face of evil. To tell you more about the importance of Lorenzo de' Medici as a source of inspiration in the aftermath of a world war, I invite to the podium Stefano Albertini, director of Casa Italiana zerilli-marimò of New York. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome again. I'm not going to give you a lecture on Lorenzo de' Medici. Do not worry about that. I take for granted that you know more or less who he was and the importance that he played, mostly as a patron of the arts. Probably that's what he's more known for, and basically the de facto ruler, the prince without the title of Florence in its golden age. He was also a poet, and this is something that fewer people know. And some people say, well, but era raccomandato, he was well introduced, that's why his poems became famous. And I assure you, no. The poems of Lorenzo de' Medici are really great poems that encapsulate and somehow capture the spirit of the Renaissance. Now, this specific piece, The Triumph of Bacchus and Ariadne, is a mythological piece. Obviously, Lorenzo would be accused a few decades later by Girolamo Savonarola, the friar that turned Florence into a very strict convent of sort, of wanting to make of Florence the new Athens instead of the new Jerusalem. And Lorenzo put up a certain number of Greek gods and goddesses statues in the city, and really was very fond of bringing Greek culture, the Greek classical culture, back alive. You know that for several centuries, nobody in Western Europe was able to read and understand Greek. And that's what happens in Florence. They bring back the Greek language and the Greek culture and the Greek literature. And with this celebration of youth, and allow me a very, very small footnote, and as a professor of literature, I need at least one, that is giovinezza, that is the recurrent word in the refrain of the Triumph of Bacchus and Ariadne. Quante bella giovinezza, how beautiful youth is. But, there is a but. The normal word that you would use for youth in Italian is gioventù, not giovinezza. So giovinezza is a rather strange word, means exactly the same thing, but not very used. Lorenzo uses it here, and then after that, you have to go to Mussolini with the hymn of fascism, Giovinezza. The title was Giovinezza. And I'm sort of certain that when Cagli and Rieti decided to dedicate a project, a beautiful project that included visual arts and music and dance, to the Italian Renaissance. The idea is that it was through the lens of the Renaissance that you could somehow inspire people to find new reasons to live and to restart. They go for this ballad, for this poem by Lorenzo de' Medici. I'm sure they were also purifying that word, giovinezza, from its fascist dirting that happened with the song. By the way, it was the same song that Toscanini refused to play in Bologna, and because of which he was slapped, and then he decided to leave and never go back to Italy until the end of fascism. So it's a very complicated thing. Back to the Renaissance. It's a song that celebrates youth, that celebrates the happiness of rediscovery, of love, but it's also a song that, as Natalia in her beautiful address, she always is able to find the words to give meaning to what we do and to remind us why we do it. So I'm very grateful for that, Natalia. So there is an undertone of sadness, the uncertainty of the future. And of course, Cagli lived that. He was a very successful young artist in Italy, in fascist Italy, and at a certain point he had nothing. He could not receive public commissions, he could not expose his paintings and exhibit them in public. So he was important, famous, and then he had absolutely nothing. He saw the war, he saw the horror of the Holocaust in person. So all of that you have during your youth can be taken away from one moment to the other. So despite the tone of the poem that seems just a celebration of youth, it's a constant reminder of the uncertainty of the future. The future that was so uncertain in the Renaissance, the Florentine Renaissance was not followed by a golden age in which everybody got along, like Pico della Mirandola had hoped. You know, they would find reasons that would show that all religions more or less have the same thing in common. No, it was devastated, Europe, by religious wars, and people were killing each other in the name of their gods. And the same happened also in the very frenetic beginning of the 20th century, and then when the totalitarianisms arrived, that spirit of freedom and of discovery that sort of, think of Berlin in the 20s and early 30s, completely disappeared and was eradicated by brutal dictatorships. So the celebration that Cagli, Rieti, Balanchine gave to New York in 1948, the celebration that found its language in the Italian Renaissance, but with this ambivalence. So on one hand, the celebration of a rebirth, of a discovery, of love, of youth, but with the awareness that the future is always uncertain. And as this, I decided to say this when we were dividing our task for the evening, not only because being director of Casa Italiana, I have to say something about Italy tonight, but also because I'm firmly convinced that some of the values of the Renaissance, of the Italian Renaissance, remain valid and immortal on many levels. And I also, on a very personal level, I think that we go there to look for the seed of the important things of a humanistic culture. And it's not a surprise that my friend Stella Levi, that you see there, survival of Auschwitz and from Rhodes, but she was educated like an Italian girl in the Italian schools. And when she's liberated, she decides to restart, to have her own Renaissance by going to Florence in the cradle of the Renaissance. So there are all these connections together. And so tonight we celebrate that connection, despite the fact that we are aware of the fragility of everything. And now, enough words. You're here for the music, and I'm dying to listen it. And so we have the great pleasure of having with us tonight Cantori New York, directed by Mark Shapiro. Please welcome them very warmly.
innamorati per caverne, per boschetti, hanno posto centro armati, ora banco riscaldati, balanzando tuttavia. Che volesse letto sia, ti domando ne certezza. Ti domando ne certezza. Balanzando, 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 balanzando. ride, gode, ride, gode tuttavia. Ride, ride, gode tuttavia. Se non vuoi stare ritorno, non ride, ride, gode tuttavia.
Vesselleno, vesselleno,
Vesselleno, questa sopra l'asino. E Silleno ride, gode tuttavia. ma non v'è certezza. Dico, ma non v'è certezza. Che volesse che così ogni domo, non v'è certezza. Io non v'è certezza, non v'è certezza, non v'è certezza.
Thank you, Mark Shapiro and Cantori New York, for the wonderful concert and reconstruction of the 1948 music for the ballet of Cagli, Rieti, and Balanchine. And now please welcome to the stage Raffaele Bedarida, art historian at Cooper Union, who has truly rediscovered the work of Corrado Cagli and reconstructed much of his life especially during the war and post-war year. Please welcome Raffaele Bedarida.
Thank you. Thanks to the organizers and the host here at the New York Public Library. And I want to thank especially the choir, Cantori New York, for their precious work. I will be focusing on the visual component and how the ballet came to fruition. We don't have a film of the performance, which makes it hard to know how Balanchine's choreography looked like. But we have photographs of the rehearsal and performance, as well as a detailed documentation of how Corrado Cagli developed the project in conversation with Balanchine. In 1946, soon after Cagli returned to New York City from the war, we heard about a little bit, he proposed to Lincoln Kirsten a book, a hand-painted book, which actually is housed here in this building in the New York Public Library for Performing Arts, which has the papers of Lincoln Kirsten, with an idea for a ballet. This is the first page. The story, as we heard, was based on Greek mythology and was well known. It's the moment after Ariadne helped Theseus leave the labyrinth. He abandoned her on the island of Naxos until the god Bacchus joins her, and they marry in a triumph. Many artists before that had represented this, from Renaissance painter Titian to modernist De Chirico, and as well in performance art, most famously Wagner. Cagli, however, avoided any clear, direct, linear narrative. He based his piece, as we saw, on the verses of Lorenzo de' Medici from the late 1400s, which he had performed in the original Italian language, and we just heard that. These were conceived by Lorenzo as a triumph, namely a parade performed and sang in the streets of Renaissance Florence, so not for a static fixed stage. Cagli's proposal in this book introduced some of the key characters and the key scenes that we have listed and described in the performance. Here we see Ariadne dancing with the satyrs. Here we have Bacchus on a throne. He also envisioned how the various figures could interact on stage and how Lorenzo's verses could accompany key moments in the ballet. So after Bacchus and Ariadne, we have the scene of Silenus, who is drunk and rides a donkey. We heard about that. And then underneath is the moment when King Midas comes in and turns everything he touches into gold. And then every episode is kept together, is framed together by the refrain that, again, we heard a lot tonight, the famous verses, chi vuol esser lieto sia, di domani non c'è certezza. So live joyfully, because tomorrow, who knows what's going to happen. It took a while before the ballet was actually put into production, but the campaign was to create some expectation and buzz around this project was pretty intense and started right away in 1946. The New York Times announced the imminent production 4 times, and then MoMA exhibited Cagli's sketches for the concept of the ballet within a show organized by Lincoln Christen. Here you see a photo of the installation. On the right are the pages that I just showed you on display. Then the magazine Harper's Bazaar reproduced the same sketches by Cagli, announcing that they would be published as a book and that the ballet would be performed. The book didn't happen, but the ballet did. And finally, Vogue magazine published a photographic service by Irving Penn, including the team behind this production. This is a photo that later became very famous, one of Penn's most famous photographs, but few people would know who this, what was the occasion for this and who everybody was. So here on the left is Corrado Cagli, who had conceived the project and also designed the costumes and the setting. Then is Rieti, Vittorio Rieti, who composed the music we just listened to, and standing is Tani Leclerc, who was performing Ariadne, and finally sitting on the right, George Balanchine, who was in charge of the choreography. The result was a monumental thing. We saw how many performers were on stage. So we had 40 dancers on stage, 40 singers in the choir, plus 2 soloists, a lavish system of costumes and setting. The setting designed by Cagli was the Chirico-like Renaissance city, and it was not just a simple backdrop. Actually, it was a structure, and the choir would inhabit it. They would stand behind, and they would be seen through the windows, and the red light would turn on when they sang and turn off when they were silent. As we heard earlier, Lorenzo was the ultimate Renaissance man, the most celebrated figure of Renaissance Florence, famous for being a poet, a philosopher, a patron of the arts. Not only did he greatly support artists such as Botticelli, but he was fully involved in their intellectual circles and creative work. According to Vasari, for his Primavera, the painting we see reproduced here, Botticelli represented some of the costumes that Lorenzo had designed himself for theatrical representation. So there was this kind of circular thing between theater and painting. Botticelli's painting, in turn, was a source for the ballet, Bacchus and Ariadne, both for the costumes. Here on the right, you see Cagli's design of Ariadne's costume, which echo some of the figures in Botticelli's work, and also in the choreography. Many of the gestures pictured in the photographs kind of emulate those gestures. And we do know that Balanchine was a big Botticelli fan. So we can say that everything looks great, everything sounds nice. Who wouldn't like a triumph of life and freedom and sensual pleasure, especially right after the disaster and tragedy of World War II? And some people did enjoy, not many actually. A critic wrote that watching the triumph of Bacchus and Ariadne, he forgot for 1 minute about the atomic bomb. Thematically, the ballet seemed timely. It was a bacchanal, a celebration of life, right after the war, and the Cold War tensions could be felt, but had not escalated yet. And so all this to say that the recipe seemed right for a triumph. The title maybe was kind of hoping for that, but the reception indeed was not that good. The New York Times commented after the premiere, here I'm quoting from the Times, it is a very sumptuous and must have cost a great effort and considerable money, but unless you are an incurable Balanchine fan, it is not very amusing, end of quote. So it is not by chance if tonight we are listening to this music for the first time since 1948. But so I'm not going to argue that the triumph of Bacchus and Ariadne was in fact a masterpiece, but I think it is an invaluable entry point to understand strategies of memory and the negotiation of national identity in the aftermath of the Second World War, especially Cagli's peculiar approach to these themes. Mussolini had exploited the cultural prestige of the Renaissance. We heard about Giovinezza, and he did that, of course, for propaganda purposes. He compared himself to Lorenzo de' Medici as a patron of the arts and as a leader of Italy's rebirth in the 20th century. He called it the Third Rome after the Empire and the Renaissance. The Renaissance was utilized in various occasions by Mussolini to promote Italy's civilizing mission worldwide, especially in this country. And this happened in particular with a growing intensity after the racial laws and the alliance with Hitler caused a diplomatic crisis. What I'm showing here is the catalog cover and an image of the Botticelli's Birth of Venus in the show Old Master, Italian Master, that toured the United States between 1939 and 1940. This is how it was exhibited here in New York at MoMA. Cagli's work, too, in the early 30s, looked back to Italy's artistic tradition, and especially the Renaissance, to build a new visual vocabulary and a new mythology for a modern Italy. He was especially interested in the concept of primordium could be translated, which would be the initial phase of a new civilization, which he identified in the present with fascism. Here, for example, Cagli takes inspiration from the iconography of Piero della Francesca and his baptism of Christ, and to depict not Christ in the center, the main character, but one of the figures in the back. It's an anonymous, unspecified neophyte, someone who is joining a new community, a new vision of the world. However, the style could not be more different from Piero. Cagli is expressionistic and muddy and somehow messy, whereas Piero is, crystal clear, light is everywhere, and the composition is mathematically perfect. Targeted as a Jew, as a homosexual, and an internationalist in art, Cagli came to the United States and reconsidered the rhetoric of the continuity with the Renaissance and the classical past that he had previously embraced and he had contributed to create as a rhetoric. When in the years when the Star of David became a sign of anti-Semitic exclusion, he represented obsessively over and over David, one of the most iconic symbols of Renaissance art, which stood at once for the centrality of Judaism in the humanistic tradition that fascism claimed to have revived, and as a signifier of resistance against a powerful oppressor. He questioned the fascist rhetoric of continuity with the classical past in other ways, through irony, homoerotic iconography, and absurdism. This is a winged victory, like in Greek antiquity, that is using a column as a battering ram to break through an arch of triumph, and it becomes this kind of gigantic sexual machine. The show that just ended at Cima traced Cagli's transformative journey during his exile in the US, which we don't have time to address now. But I want to stress that in the years immediately preceding the Ballet, Cagli fought in the Second World War in Europe as a US soldier, and then came back to New York in 1946 with drawings and a number of publications and organized exhibitions, mostly focusing on the destruction of the war and the concentration camp of Buchenwald in Germany, which he saw as a liberator as part of the US Army in the spring of 1945, so very, very recently. These works gave Cagli notoriety for the first time in the United States. He exhibited them throughout the country. Museums purchased them, including MoMA and the Whitney in the city. And he received the Guggenheim Fellowship to continue exploring these themes and the way of representation. And this is the moment when actually sent the proposal to Kirsten, a project that apparently couldn't be more different from those Holocaust drawing, but the juxtaposition of the two, the coexistence of the two is significant and I believe deliberate. In a moment when everybody, especially in the United States, talked about an Italian new Renaissance after the end of fascism, Cagli rejected that idea, the idea of a rebirth from scratch. Everybody was thinking like, we start from zero, no memories, let's not talk about the recent past, let's move forward. And Cagli wrote a piece about it and worked on this idea of continuity. And in many ways, Bacchus and Ariadne did that, in the sense that it was a triumph, but it also verged on chaos. It celebrated life, but in a way that was filled with anxiety, right? It always, in the song, the word tuttavia comes all the time, right? Nevertheless, right? He referenced the Renaissance, but not as the realm of harmony and rationality, but as a paradigm for the malleability of history and memory, in which rebirth carries within itself the contradictions and also the traumas of past lives. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight. We are going to close now. Thanks to our guests. Thanks to Cantori New York and Mark Shapiro, Raffaele Bedarida, the presenters of this program, and to all of you who attended. And to the New York Public Library, which is a very important place for the city and a place for everybody. Thank you.